Diluc used to be heralded as one of, if not the strongest character in Genshin Impact in terms of DPS output. Since that long gone time, we've seen many new characters be released and we have a better general understanding of the game's mechanics, meaning many others have risen above him in general popularity. Despite this, for a variety of reasons, I feel that Diluc holds a special, unique place in the game as a DPS carry that won't be taken away from him anytime soon. It's been a while, but I'm finally back with another entry into my gameplay design analysis series where I investigate underused or underrated Genshin characters to get a better understanding of why they have that reputation. Genshin has been receiving updates for a bit over a year now, and that is more than enough time to pick up on a few trends regarding the direction and design philosophies surrounding combat gameplay. Specifically, the introduction of more mechanics that are generally more complex in nature. It is most noticeable when you place text descriptions side by side, comparing stuff from earlier on in the game's lifespan to now. You can easily tell this applies to things like character kits and weapon passives, but also the effects on the new artifact sets in 2.3 seem to be following suit. Now that's not to say that simplicity is gone forever, but it does seem like it will become increasingly less common. I mean, it makes sense that if you want players to spend money on this thing, you try to make it new and shiny. However, typically in games, developers continuously trying to innovate on mechanics eventually leads to older alternatives being weaker simply by doing less. Most of you are probably familiar with this concept as it is more commonly referred to, power creep. I feel that Genshin hasn't actually fallen victim to power creep, at least not yet, for a single reason. Characters focus on niches. Sure, there have been and will be many more cases of characters having very specific uses, and thus they are unpopular due to not fitting on many teams. However, it does push the design philosophy that players should be encouraged to discover specific synergies between characters, and in the long run, this will result in less of, you need these exact characters to succeed, and more of, if you want to focus on using this specific character that you really like, they work well with these others. And because in general, these simpler characters still excel at what they specifically try to accomplish, their existence is not invalidated. Think about the characters who generally need the most on-field time to be effective. When you look at these standard banner 5 stars like Diluc and Keqing, and other 5 stars who we knew were developed earlier during the betas like Xiao and Ayaka, the game plan with them pretty much boils down to basic attack enemies, use elemental skill to charge burst, basic attack some more. They are relatively simpler and straightforward to play when compared to the more recent main DPS carries who require a bit more in terms of strategy and execution. With Hu Tao, you want to try and manage staying at lower health to maximize your damage, which entails not dying, obviously, but without just mindlessly healing to full. Eula's burst has the potential for a ton of damage in a single instance, but requires you to build up stacks over its brief duration. And soon we will have Arataki Ito, who seems to revolve around rapidly building up stacks with his whole kit and spending them on charge attacks. But at the end of the day, how much does this complexity actually contribute? Well, not really that much. Unlike supports who have the capability to do a wide variety of things to help the team, DPS carries only have one simple job. Using different DPS characters is more about the means than the ends, especially because content in this game is not so difficult to the point where you need the most meta team compositions. What matters more is personal preference. I, for example, enjoy characters that have lots of opportunities for optimization, but at the same time, I acknowledge that many others prefer their gameplay to be more clear-cut and straightforward. And when it comes to this idea, I feel that Diluc exemplifies it more than any other character in the game. Like most characters, his normal attacks have no special properties on their own. His elemental skill can be used up to 3 times, and since elemental skills always animation cancel normal attacks, that does mean that you can do a sequence like this. I wouldn't consider this to be a complex mechanic though, because it really is just an alternating 2-button sequence that doesn't have strict timing and will automatically target enemies while advancing forward. So aside from that, his elemental skill is literally just an attack. Diluc's elemental burst does damage in a large area of effect while knocking enemies back, then grants him pyro infusion on his normal attacks. Basically, he does damage and then gains the ability to do enhanced damage. His ascension passives follow suit by just giving him bonus numbers on his other talents, and one of them might as well not even be there because charge attacks are just not worth using on him. Unlike other characters, Diluc has no way of repositioning himself while doing damage, doesn't build up over time, isn't self-sufficient with healing or resistance to interruption, and pretty much doesn't provide anything to the team other than just damage. Well, just by that previous sentence, you would think that he straight up sucks, but he is capable of things that other characters are not in his own simple ways. First off, out of all the characters that can grant themselves elemental infusions or conversions that allow them to do elemental damage on their normal attacks, many of them can't switch out without losing those effects and putting the associated ability on cooldown. Hu Tao, Raiden Shogun, Child, Xiao, and Yoimiya are all examples of this. Meanwhile, those like Keqing, Noelle, and Diluc are able to have it carry over despite switching. It matters the most for Diluc though, because it makes him the only Pyro character that can do this, and Pyro also happens to have some of the best reactions in the game. The practical application for this is that you don't have to maintain perfect rotations on your team's abilities. For example, if you're using any Pyro DPS, you probably want to have Xingqiu's burst activated, but if you use your infusion ability first for whatever reason, your options are to either cut down all of your damage by not being able to vaporize, or switch out and suffer a lengthy cooldown. Aside from that, the freedom to group enemies together or give yourself a shield whenever you want is quite nice. The other nice thing about Diluc is that his kit isn't conditional at all. What I mean by that is, he works at full capacity in pretty much any scenario he's placed in, and there's essentially never any reason to not use his full kit. Specifically when it comes to abilities that affect your health, have long cooldowns, or have high energy costs, sometimes you run into scenarios where you don't know if it's worth using then or saving for later. Diluc never faces this dilemma because his elemental skill is short cooldown and generates lots of energy for his low cost, low cooldown elemental burst. Using it never feels like a waste because you get it back right away. Both of these things mentioned contribute to Diluc's gameplay feeling uniquely free-flowing yet continuous. And of course, I can't forget to mention the fact that he is a standard banner 5-star, meaning unlike limited characters that are at the mercy of not getting reruns for long periods of time, you can technically pull Diluc whenever. Of course, there are other things that make Diluc strong that aren't unique to him though. Aside from maybe the lack of crit substat claymores, his inherent properties are perfectly suited for his role as a DPS carry. First off, he is Pyro, which gives him access to the multiplicative amplifying reactions of Melt and Vaporize, the Crimson Witch artifact set, the universally strong Elemental Resonance Fervent Flames, and a variety of Pyro supports to activate it as well as generate energy for him. Diluc's elemental skill also has a property shared by some other Pyro DPS abilities, which is a bypass to the standard internal cooldown. Whereas most moves in the game cannot reapply their element within 2.5 seconds or 3 separate hits, each hit of Searing Onslaught always applies Pyro. Of course, this means more reactions and thus more damage. Also, Diluc's wide claymore swings give him easy AoE and can stagger enemies more than any other weapon type. For the stuff I just mentioned, there are and will continue to be new characters that have the same capabilities, but as long as Diluc continues to have those other strengths unique to him, he will stay relevant. Sure, those things may seem pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, but at the end of the day, Genshin is a game all about tailoring your gameplay to your own preferences. For the same reasons that you might hate a character's gameplay, others might love it. The fact that those reasons exist, plus all the other factors that go into someone liking a character, makes it so that characters won't get so easily replaced by one another. And for that reason, I don't think Diluc will be power crept anytime soon. That would entail someone doing exactly what he does better than him, and in the way that he does it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this somewhat unique perspective on character gameplay design and balancing, and as always, thanks for watching.